Yearning for the heavens, yet cursed with mortal life, the tragic story of the High Elves traces its path all the way from the mythical continent of Aldmeris to the superpower the race would eventually command in the Fourth Era as the Thalmor. Welcome everyone, it's Spopes. In this video, we're going to cover the history of the High Elves, also known as the Altmer, one of the most fascinating and controversial races in the world of the Elder Scrolls. Starting with their origins on Aldmeris and passing through all the eras of Elder Scrolls history, we'll trace the story of the High Elves from the beginning till the end, focusing on inspirations from the real world and how the theology of our own world fits into the story of the High Elves. Before we dive into this story, please make sure you subscribe to the channel. Please like and hype the video. Consider becoming a member to support me, picking up some merch, or leaving a donation. All right, let's learn about the High Elves, where they came from, what they did throughout the history of the Elder Scrolls, and why this race has become so controversial. The story opens with the beginning of the world. Before the mortal plane of Nirn was created, there was the Aetherius. The great spirit or creator god Anu existed within this ethereal realm and created Auri-El, who in turn birthed the Aedra, or the gods. The High Elves believed they were originally Aedra, immortal and unbound to the physical world. But then the trickster god Lorkhan convinced the gods to create the mortal plane, Nirn. Entering Nirn, the elves were sapped of their divinity. They became tethered to aging, death, and mortal needs. As a result, the Altmer view reality as a prison. They seek to follow the proper life, living with perfection and purity, in the hopes that through their perfection they may one day earn access back to the immortal realm. In many ways, this mirrors the heretical Christian doctrine of Gnosticism. Gnostics, too, view reality as a prison. They see the world as having been created by a malevolent trickster god to sap divine beings of their immortality and creative power. And just like the High Elves, the view of Gnostics, both ancient and modern, is that reality must be transcended, and that by living life in a particular way, life can be transcended and access to the immortal realm regranted. But the elves were not left without a guide in their new mortal prison. The god Auri-El became their paragon, the true king of the Aldmer, and the source of their efforts to liberate themselves from the mortal plane. Lorkhan the trickster may have trapped them in the mortal plane, but Auri-El was the warrior who fought back. Eventually, he led the armies of the ancestors against Lorkhan's forces, successfully ripping out the heart of the trickster god and shooting it across the world to create Red Mountain. After achieving this feat to show the elves that it was possible to transcend the mortal world, he ascended into heaven in full view of his followers. He also showed the elves the steps they needed to achieve to recapture their divinity. This concept, known as Draco Chrysalis, or the path to Alaxon, is the core of Altmer obsession. The Altmer aren't just snobs for the sake of it. They're trying to follow Auri-El's example. They believe that if they live perfectly, preserve their bloodlines, and reject human corruption, they can eventually break the chains of Nirn like Auri-El and return to the stars. The High Elves hold that the first place they touched down in on Nirn was a now lost continent called Aldmeris. In the world of the Elder Scrolls, it is unclear and a point of great contention whether Aldmeris actually ever really existed, or whether it's simply a metaphor for the lost divinity of the High Elves. Whatever the case may be, the history of the High Elves holds that they eventually left Aldmeris and arrived first at the Summerset Isles. There they built the Crystal Tower, a monument to their ancestors and a repository of all their magical knowledge. The period in which the High Elves supposedly left Aldmeris to go to Summerset is known as the Merethic era, and this era also saw the event known as the Great Sundering, in which the original elves, the Altmer, separated into 4 distinct species. The elves who followed the prophet Veloth became the Chimer, eventually to become known as the Dunmer or Dark Elves. The followers of Trinimac became the Orcs, and the elves that delved deep into the earth became known as the Dwemer or the Dwarves. Those that stayed in Summerset, clinging to the old ways and attempting to become pure in an effort to regain their divinity, became the Altmer or the High Elves. This period also saw the formation of a subgroup of the High Elves, known as the Ayleids, or the Heartland High Elves. They mostly look the same as High Elves but may have had slightly darker skin. But in terms of their culture, they were a terrifying deviation. The Altmer of Summerset have always worshipped the Aedra, the gods they believed to be their ancestors. But the Ayleids began making pacts with Daedric princes, like Meridia and Molag Bal, to gain power. It was in Cyrodiil that the Ayleids built the White Gold Tower to amplify their magical dominance, and at this time they also enslaved the local native human tribes, the Needs. For centuries, the Ayleids ruled the center of the continent with godlike cruelty. They made sport of their slaves, twisting them into flesh sculptures sculptures, having competitions for how many they could kill. This eventually led to the Alessian Revolt, in which men escaped the clutches of the Ayleids and began a pogrom of the elves, led by Pelennor Whitestrake. Throughout generations afterward, the Altmer continued to look down on mainland elves. To the traditionalists in Alinor, the Ayleids had degenerated by worshipping demons. After the Alessian Revolt, the liberated children of men created the Empire of Cyrodiil and took the White Gold Tower. To the race of men, the White Gold Tower is a symbol of imperial glory, but to the Thalmor of the Fourth Age, it became a stolen heirloom waiting to be reclaimed. After the Merethic era and the Great Sundering, the Altmer became quite isolationist. While the Empire of Men rose in Cyrodiil, the High Elves remained on their islands and focused on refining their magic and calligraphy. However, the Dureni clan, an Altmer noble house, expanded to High Rock, ruling over the local humans, and eventually siring the Breton race, also known as the Half-Elves. That all occurred within the First Era, but in the Second Era, the first true Aldmeri dominion arose. Led by the legendary Queen Irene, the Altmer allied with the Bosmer and Khajiit to claim the Ruby Throne of Cyrodiil. It was Irene's belief that the younger races of men were too reckless to rule Tamriel, a sentiment that began with her reign, but that would echo through the centuries. At the dawning of the Third Era, though, it became apparent that the peace and isolation of the Elves of Summerset would not be eternal. The man known as Tiber Septim became the first emperor of the Septim dynasty, and with his new power he did the unthinkable. He conquered the Summerset Isles. Instead of conquering by diplomacy, he used the greatest siege weapon the world of Nirn had yet seen, the Numidium, a giant brass godlike automaton that laid waste to Alinor in a matter of hours. Suddenly the Altmer found themselves the subjects of a human empire. Humans who they looked down upon, even when they weren't enslaving them, had conquered them, and their resentment from this conquest simmered for centuries, eventually fueling a radical nationalist movement known as the Thalmor. The Third Era ended with the Oblivion Crisis, a massive invasion of Nirn conducted by the Daedra. The human empire struggled to contain this threat, and during the turmoil, the Thalmor arose and instated themselves as the true monarchy of the continent, establishing the Third Aldmeri Dominion. This began a war of absolute conquest, in which the Thalmor ravaged across Tamriel, waging the Great War against the Empire, which eventually culminated in the White Gold Concordat. This treaty banned the worshipping of Talos, the deified form of Tiber Septim. To the Altmer, the idea of a man becoming a god is the ultimate insult to their divine heritage. By the time we enter the events of Skyrim, the High Elves aren't just a race, they're a superpower pulling the strings of the entire continent. From the divine halls of Aetherius to the political shadow games of the Fourth Era, the High Elves remain consistent in one thing: their unbreakable pride. Their memory is long, they believe in their divine heritage, and even though there are people defined by what they've lost, they will stop at nothing to get it back. So were the Altmer right in trying to retain their divine glory? Or were they an imperialist scourge on the continents? Let me know what you think in the comments. But before we finish up, I want to cover my thoughts about the history of the High Elves, how I think they overlap with real-world cultures, and how their history fits in through a Christian lens. So again, the theology of the High Elves seems to most closely resemble that of the Gnostics, or really any other mystery cult throughout the centuries, whether it's Mithraism, Freemasonry, or even Mormonism. There is an overall theme in real-world human culture of believing in a lost divinity. So for instance, for Mormons, it's the fall. But what's interesting about Mormonism compared to normal Christianity is they believe that they are intended to become as gods again, a very Luciferian doctrine. This even fits into Platonic doctrine. Plato famously believed that the real world is but a shadow of the world of the eternal ideas, and that the purpose of life is to awaken disillusion and transcend it. This led to the semi-heretical doctrines of the Christian Neoplatonists, who somewhat overlapped with Gnosticism in the belief that the material realm is a trap meant to be transcended. But ultimately, what the High Elves are not is particularly Christian. The races of men with their theology generally overlap more with Christian doctrine. They view the mortal realm as a gift instead of a curse, and they seek to honor that gift and live the best lives possible, but without casting the mortal realm aside. From a political perspective, the High Elves most closely align with any group throughout human history that is focused on racial purity and divine right, so most notably the Nazis, who seem to have been a major inspiration for the Thalmor of the Fourth Era. But even with all that, I still tend to find the High Elves to be my favorite race in the Elder Scrolls. I love their architecture, their culture, and their history. That doesn't mean I overlook the isolationist nature of their culture or even their tendency towards slavery. It's just that aesthetically and culturally, the High Elves are the closest to the divine. They may be taking, from a Christian perspective, a heretical approach to recapturing the divine, not seeking forgiveness of sins, but essentially practicing magic and divine arts to attempt to recapture their divinity. But at least there is a focus on divinity, a focus on the light, on the beauty. So that's why I'll always love the High Elves, and I was fascinated to learn more about their culture and their history when recording this video. So in the comments, let me know what you think about the High Elves as a race, what you think about this new type of video I made today, whether you'd like to see more lore videos, and I am aware that I glossed over a lot here. This is meant to be a relatively short video providing an overview of High Elf culture, but for those who are really into the lore of the Elder Scrolls, please do chime in with whatever you'd like to add to the story of the Altmer, the Great Sundering, etc. I'm especially interested to hear from Skyrim players more about the Thalmor, their totalitarian or even genocidal ambitions, and how who the High Elves eventually turned into may have changed your perspective on their whole cultural history. I really appreciate you all watching. I hope you found the video to be informative and interesting. If so, please do like the video and subscribe to the channel. Consider supporting me with a membership, picking up some merch, or leaving a donation. And as always, we're going to finish up with a prayer to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Lord Jesus, thank you for the creative inspiration behind the development of the lore in the Elder Scrolls series. Thank you for how it helps us re-examine our own world and its history through a lens of fantasy. Lord, I thank you for my community, for everyone watching the video today. I ask that you bless them in all aspects of life, especially for those who are trying to follow you, Jesus. Make their path easier. And also, Lord, please do bring all recently departed souls across the world to your side. I give you all glory for the channel and for the video today, Lord. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. Again, everyone, thanks for watching. Do let me know in the comments what you think about this new video type. And before you go, please do like the video, hype it, and subscribe. And when you do subscribe, turn on notifications, because I'll be back soon with new content.